Two female DEA agents vanished in Washington state while probing cross-border smuggling operations. For 8 years, their final whereabouts remained an enigma. Then, a mining team surveying a cave network stumbled upon clues about the lost agents in a waterlogged chamber, a find that turned all assumptions about their fate upside down. At exactly 8 a.m., a sharp ring jolted Ethan Carter out of uneasy dreams that had plagued him for nearly a decade. His hand groped across the nightstand in his Seattle loft, toppling a half-drunk coffee mug before grabbing his phone. The screen flashed the name of his boss from DEA International Operations. Regional Director Amanda Hayes never dialed this early unless something major had broken. "Carter," he mumbled, his voice still groggy from sleep. "Ethan, you might want to brace yourself," Hayes said, her tone unusually somber, instantly sharpening his focus. "There's a breakthrough in Emily's case." His sister's name struck like a punch to the gut. 8 years of relentless questions. 8 years of not knowing if she was gone or still out there. 8 years of guilt for not protecting her when it mattered most. Ethan's grip tightened on the phone, his fingers pressing hard against the sleek case. Jake Morrison and his mining crew were scouting an old shaft near the Canadian border for mineral deposits, Hayes went on. Through a natural opening in the cave's roof, they spotted a white Ford F-150. "Ethan, the VIN matches Emily's missing truck." The world seemed to spin. Ethan steadied his breathing, forcing himself to absorb the news. "The truck, it's definitely hers?" On-site confirmation leaves no doubt. "It looks like the vehicle either fell or was forced through the skylight above, ending up in a half-flooded cavern below. I'm texting you the location now. Local forensics is already there, but I wanted you to hear this from me first." Ethan was already yanking on his jeans, the phone tucked between his shoulder and ear. "How long has it been down there?" Any sign of he stopped, unable to voice the rest. "That's the troubling part," Hayes said cautiously. "Even though it's supposedly been underwater for 8 years, the initial report shows oddly little rust or corrosion. The lead forensic tech suspects it was placed there far more recently than when they disappeared." The revelation sent a shiver through him. If the truck was moved recently, someone had been hiding the truth all this time. Someone who might still be out there. He slung his DEA jacket over his holster, snatching his badge and keys. "I'm on my way." "Ethan, I get that this hits close to home, but you've got to keep it professional. We're treating this as a crime scene, not just a recovery." "Got it." But they both knew he wasn't being honest. Nothing about Emily's case could ever be just business for him. The drive north wove through Washington's thickening forests, Seattle's cityscape fading into towering pines and twisting mountain passes. Ethan had traveled these roads endlessly in the months after Emily and her partner, Lauren Brooks, went missing, chasing every tip, checking every sighting. They'd been tracking smuggling routes along the border, targeting pathways used to funnel drugs and people between British Columbia and Washington. Their last report had been standard, just another day of surveillance in a career packed with them. The GPS guided him to a newly carved gravel road, likely made by the mining company for their surveys. DEA SUVs and orange cones marked a temporary command post at the cave's entrance. The area hummed with activity, forensics experts in white suits, local cops securing the perimeter, and the quiet focus of people used to handling grim scenes. Ethan parked and approached the head forensic investigator, a woman in her 50s with keen eyes behind protective goggles. She introduced herself as Dr. Rachel Newman. "Agent Carter, I was told you'd be coming," she said, her voice blending professionalism with a touch of empathy. "I need to warn you about what we've uncovered." They headed toward a tent set up near the cave's mouth, passing evidence tags and camera gear. Inside, 3 body bags rested on tables, each labeled with temporary ID codes. "We've pulled 3 bodies from the cave so far," Dr. Newman explained. "Through field ID methods, we've confirmed one as Agent Lauren Brooks, based on dental records and her DEA badge, still on her body." Ethan's throat tightened. Lauren had been Emily's partner for 3 years. a skilled agent with a little girl waiting at home. How did she die? Dr. Newman guided him to a laptop displaying X-ray images. This is where it turns criminal. Agent Brooks has signs of severe blunt force trauma to the head, injuries that don't match a crash or fall. The marks point to intentional blows with a heavy object. This changes our case from a missing person search to a murder investigation. The other two bodies? Ethan asked. Both female, heavily decomposed. No hits in missing persons records yet. We're running DNA and coordinating with Canadian police. She paused, watching his expression. Agent Carter, I need to be straight with you. We've scoured the truck and the nearby cave area. Agent Emily Carter's body isn't among those we've found. The words brought a mix of relief and fresh fear. If Emily wasn't in the cave with Lauren and the truck, where was she? Had she gotten away at first, only to meet her fate later? Or worse, had she been taken alive? The thought chilled him to the core. Dr. Newman used high-powered lights to show him the truck through the cave's opening, revealing the cavern below. The white F-150 sat half-submerged, its DEA logo still faintly visible in the murky water. Seeing it triggered memories of Emily grinning as she showed off her new work vehicle, joking about its ability to tackle rough border terrain. The lack of water damage is strange, Dr. Newman added. This cave floods every season. If the truck had been here 8 years, it should be far more degraded. Our early estimate suggests it's been there 6 months. Tops. Ethan reviewed the recovery list again, desperate for a clue he might have overlooked, but Emily's name was nowhere to be found. Just a void where answers should have been, alongside the violent proof of Lauren's death. We're widening the search area, Dr. Newman said reassuringly. If there are more remains in nearby caves, we'll locate them. But Ethan knew from 8 years of hunting that some people stayed hidden on purpose, and some truths were worth killing to keep secret. He gazed at the cave's skylight, wondering if Emily had stared through it in her last moments, or if her story stretched beyond this dark pit. Lauren Brooks's murder made one thing clear. His sister and her partner hadn't just gotten lost or crashed. They'd been hunted, and their killer had gone to extremes to bury the evidence. The Cascade Ridge Motel looked like a forgotten piece of the past, its weathered neon sign buzzing faintly in the dim afternoon haze. Ethan pulled into the gravel lot just past noon, his body weighed down by a fatigue that ran deeper than physical exhaustion. The emotional blow of seeing Lauren Brooks's body, of facing the brutal truth of what happened to his sister's partner, pressed on him like a heavy stone. Director Hayes had been blunt on the call. Take the required break, Ethan. For hours minimum. That's an order. DA rules were there for a reason. Agents clouded by emotion made errors, overlooked key evidence, put themselves or others in danger. He knew she was right, but every second away from the case felt like abandoning Emily's memory. The motel room reeked of cheap disinfectant and worn carpet, a mix that somehow made the space feel even lonelier. Ethan placed his service pistol on the nightstand with deliberate care, followed by a stack of case files from his truck. 8 years of reports, interviews, and dead ends he knew by heart. His hands shook as he twisted open a water bottle. The trembling wasn't from the chilly mountain air or hunger. It was the crash of adrenaline mixed with raw grief. Seeing that truck in the cave, knowing Lauren had been killed while Emily was still missing, had destroyed the faint hope he'd clung to in uncertainty. For 8 years, he could pretend they might have vanished on purpose. Started fresh somewhere. Now that illusion was gone. He just hung his jacket over the chair by the window when a sharp knock broke the silence, 3 firm raps, official and commanding. Through the peephole, he saw a uniformed officer, tall and broad, with graying hair peeking from under his sheriff's hat. Ethan opened the door, angling his body to shield the view of his gun on the nightstand. "Agent Carter, can I assist you?" "I'm Sheriff Lucas Bennett, Cascade County." The man offered a strong handshake, his palms slightly clammy. "Sorry to barge in, but I've got urgent news about your sister's case." The sheriff's uniform was pristine, his badge gleaming, every detail signaling professional polish. Yet something in his pale gray eyes seemed off, a flicker of unease that clashed with his confident stance. "Come in, Sheriff." Ethan stepped back, noticing how Bennett's eyes quickly scanned the room, pausing on the files and pistol. Bennett doffed his hat, revealing a sweat-dampened hairline despite the crisp October chill. "I'll cut to the chase. I've got a confidential source claiming they know something about Agent Emily Carter, your sister." Ethan's heart raced. "What kind of details?" "That's the tricky part." Bennett shifted his stance, his hand brushing near his holster before falling back. "This person's had bad run-ins with feds before. They'll only talk to Emily's family, not anyone acting as a DEA agent. They're jumpy, ready to bolt at the first whiff of an official probe." "Where's this source now?" "That's why I'm here." "They're open to a meeting, but only at a spot they pick, someplace secluded, far from any prying eyes or cameras." Bennett's phone vibrated, and he stole a quick glance at it before pressing on. "I know it's not standard procedure, but considering what this information could mean." Ethan eyed the sheriff closely, searching for any telltale signs. "What exactly did the source share with you? Why step forward now after all these years?" "The cave discovery's got tongues wagging," Bennett replied, his words picking up speed. "When bodies turn up, old secrets start creeping out of the shadows. I get why you're wary, but I was on the ground during the initial search. I'm as eager for answers as you are." "I hear you, Sheriff. What's the latest on today's evidence haul?" "I only got a quick look at the scene." Bennett leaned in, his curiosity sharpening like a blade. "I was hoping you could fill me in. My team's been sidelined, feds calling the shots, you know." "Have all 3 bodies been ID'd? Any personal items found?" 2 victims are still unknown. Lauren Brooks was confirmed via dental records. "And the truck?" Bennett pushed, his tone a touch too eager. "Word is it's in oddly good shape. Did the forensics crew mention any timeline guesses?" Alarm bells clanged in Ethan's head. The sheriff's questions zeroed in on evidence specifics, sidestepping the human cost. "They're still working the scene." "Why the interest?" "Just trying to piece it all together," Bennett said, swiping sweat from his brow. "And Emily, was her body among the ones pulled out?" There it was, a fleeting glint in Bennett's eyes when Ethan shook his head. "Relief?" It flickered and vanished so fast Ethan almost questioned it. "No, Emily wasn't in the cave," Ethan said evenly, studying the sheriff's face. "That's..." Bennett hesitated, visibly steadying himself. "Well, that keeps the door open that she might have made it through whatever happened. All the more reason to talk to my source." "Tell me, Sheriff, will the forensics team widen their net? Bringing in tech like ground-penetrating radar?" Bennett's answer came too fast, too polished. "Standard protocol would mean mapping out a broader grid, deploying cadaver dogs, using GPR for the surrounding terrain. The DEA'll likely call in thermal drones, check nearby streams, and scour game trails for signs of remains shifted by wildlife. They'd cover at least a 5-mile radius from the main site." Ethan nodded slowly. Few small-town sheriffs could rattle off DEA procedures with such precision. "You seem well-versed in federal investigation tactics." "I've collaborated with your agency before," Bennett said, his gaze sliding away. "Mostly cross-border stuff. We've got to sync up, avoid stepping on each other's toes." "Naturally." Ethan rose, signaling the conversation's end. "I'll need to run any meeting by my boss first." "Time's tight," Bennett pressed, standing as well. "My source won't stick around long. They're spooked, Agent Carter. Whatever they know, it's kept them on edge for 8 years. Give me 2 hours. I'll reach out through proper channels." Bennett's jaw clenched, but he gave a curt nod. 2 hours. After that, I can't promise they'll still talk. He headed for the door, then paused. "Agent Carter, I know what it's like to lose family. I had a sister too. Lost her in a wreck at 23. Not knowing, that's a heavier burden." The words felt rehearsed, lacking the sincerity to match Bennett's expression. Ethan kept his face grateful until the door shut, then moved to the window. He watched Bennett linger in his cruiser, engrossed in what looked like a tense phone call, before finally pulling away. Every instinct honed over 15 years with the DEA screamed trouble. Bennett's pointed questions, his insider knowledge, the sudden appearance of a source mere hours after the bodies were found, it all wove a web too suspicious to dismiss. But if there was even a sliver of truth to the sheriff's claim about Emily, Ethan couldn't ignore it. He reached for his phone to call Director Hayes, then paused. Official channels meant official alerts, and Bennett would know instantly if the feds started digging. If the sheriff was dirty, tipping him off would let him erase his tracks. Ethan grabbed his service pistol, checking the clip before sliding it into his holster. Whatever Bennett was playing at, one thing was certain: the sheriff knew more about Emily's disappearance than any outsider should. And his thinly veiled relief at hearing Emily's body wasn't in the cave hinted that knowledge was worth guarding at all costs. The DEA field office sat on the 15th floor of a federal tower in downtown Seattle, its windows framing a sweeping view of Elliott Bay that Ethan barely registered as he swiped his badge at security around 2 p.m. His mind churned, replaying Bennett's visit, every subtle expression, every overly precise question, every moment of relief when he learned Emily's body hadn't surfaced. The archive room buzzed with the hum of cooling systems built to protect decades of case records. Ethan started with the digital archives, his fingers racing across the keyboard to pull up the original missing persons report, the one he'd filed himself 8 years ago when Emily didn't check in after 2 days. Reading his own words dragged him back to the gut-wrenching panic of those early hours, the slow slide from worry to despair as days stretched into weeks. But it was Sheriff Bennett's role in the investigation that caught his eye now. Bennett had submitted his first report at 7:23 a.m. the morning after Emily and Lauren vanished, strikingly thorough for someone who claimed to have been off duty the night before. Scrutinizing Bennett's report with fresh suspicion, Ethan felt his unease solidify. "Given my deep familiarity with the local landscape," Bennett had written, "I suggest prioritizing these search zones." What followed was a meticulously crafted grid that, Ethan now saw, left a deliberate gap along the Canadian border. Bennett had backed each omission with plausible excuses. This area was too rugged for vehicles, that zone flooded regularly, another was private land with tight security that would have flagged any trespassers. Ethan pulled up satellite imagery from 8 years back, cross-referencing it with Bennett's suggestions. The impassable terrain showed clear trails. The flooded areas were parched in that October's photos, and the secure private land looked like deserted buildings with no fences or guards. Digging into the supplemental files, he found a report that chilled him. Tom Grayson, a game warden with 3 decades in these forests, had filed a conflicting assessment 2 days after Bennett's. Grayson noted active trails in Sectors 7 and 9, the very areas Bennett called inaccessible. He'd even flagged recent tire tracks near the cave system, unrelated to logging. Yet Grayson's report had been buried in the back files, never folded into the main case. Ethan's fingers flew as he queried missing persons databases for Cascade County and nearby areas, setting a 10-year scope focused on Bennett's patrol zones. The results made his stomach drop. 17 missing persons cases tied to Bennett's routes. The state average for similar rural counties was 4 or 5. The victims formed a haunting pattern, mostly young women, often immigrants or solo travelers, people whose absences might not spark major searches. Sophia Martinez, 28, an undocumented migrant last seen thumbing a ride near the border. Lily Tran, 19, a student whose car stalled on Highway 20. Irina Petrova, 24, a Russian hiker who disappeared on a solo trek. Case after case bore Bennett's signature: likely voluntary absence, possible border hop to dodge immigration, no signs of foul play. His authoritative reports had effectively stalled deeper probes, and jurisdictional tangles meant feds rarely challenged local sheriff's calls. Using his federal access, Ethan pulled Bennett's duty logs from that October 8 years ago. The official record showed routine patrols, nothing unusual. But cross-checking with county motor pool fuel receipts revealed a stark mismatch. Bennett's logged routes should have used about 80 miles worth of gas. The receipt showed he'd burned enough for 240 miles, 3 times as much. Where had he gone that night? The answer came from an overlooked source. Tucked in the original investigation's supplemental files was raw cell tower data, collected but never examined. In the frenzy of a multi-agency search, no one had checked Bennett's phone pings. Ethan fed the data into mapping software, watching as Bennett's movements formed a damning trail. At 11:47 p.m., roughly 2 hours after Emily's last check-in, Bennett's phone pinged a tower near the cave system, where the truck was just found. He lingered there for over an hour, his phone hitting towers in a pattern suggesting he was moving around the site, not just passing through. Then, at 2:15 a.m., the pings showed him heading north toward the Canadian border before looping back to town. Bennett had been at the crime scene the night Emily and Lauren disappeared, hours before any missing persons report, when only their killer should have known something was wrong. The evidence hit Ethan like a weight. A corrupt sheriff perfectly placed to aid smuggling, systematically burying disappearances, possibly tied to the murder of 2 DEA agents. But suspicion wasn't proof, especially when accusing a fellow cop. Ethan knew why he couldn't report this officially. Law enforcement was a tight web. Any probe into Bennett would flash across the system, alerting him within minutes. Evidence would vanish, witnesses would clam up or disappear, and any hope of learning Emily's fate would fade. Ethan methodically copied files to an encrypted thumb drive, bank records showing Bennett living far beyond a sheriff's paycheck, property deeds for 3 rental homes and a yacht, all bought with cash in the last 6 years, travel logs of frequent Vancouver and Seattle trips, always crossing at remote border points, not official checkpoints. The portrait was clear. A man corrupted long ago, turning his badge into a lucrative side hustle built on human suffering. But had he escalated from enabling smuggling to killing? Had Emily and Lauren uncovered his scheme, forcing him to silence them? Ethan's phone buzzed, Bennett texting from a personal number. Source is ready to meet. 5 p.m. Old Bracken Ridge Mill off Forest Road 47. Come alone or they're gone. The spot was an ambush waiting to happen. Remote, 1 road in, no cell signal. If Bennett wanted to take out a Fed getting too close, it was ideal. But it was also the kind of place where Emily might have been held, might have died, might still be waiting to be found. Ethan secured the files and slipped the encrypted drive into his pocket. He had 4 critical pieces of evidence: Bennett's presence at the crime scene, his deliberate misdirection of the initial search, the string of disappearances tied to his patrol routes, and his unexplainable wealth. It wasn't enough to lock him up, maybe not even to haul him in, but it was plenty to confirm he was dealing with a murderer. The challenge now was leveraging that knowledge to track down Emily without becoming Bennett's next target. Checking out a vehicle from the DEA motor pool took under 5 minutes, but each second dragged like hours for Ethan. He chose a nondescript gray Honda Accord with dark windows and civilian tags, the kind of car that could slip through traffic unnoticed. His hands stayed steady as he signed the form, but his brain churned with the weight of what he'd uncovered in the archives. By 3:25 p.m., Ethan was parked across from the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, engine idling, AC on low to keep the windows clear. He'd swapped his DEA gear for civilian attire, faded jeans, a navy jacket, and a baseball cap pulled low to shade his face. The encrypted drive, loaded with Bennett's secrets, rested in his jacket's inner pocket, a digital safeguard he hoped he wouldn't need to use. Bennett stepped out of the station at 3:32 p.m., his demeanor a stark contrast to the jittery tension he'd shown at the motel. Now he moved with sharp intent, his eyes sweeping the parking lot in a practice scan for tails. Ethan waited until 2 cars pulled out before trailing, keeping a 3-car gap as they wove through town. The sheriff's cruiser swung north onto Highway 20, then veered onto a series of rough logging roads. Ethan's gut tightened as Bennett ran a classic anti-surveillance routine. Pointless turns, speed shifts, pausing on the shoulder to force cars to pass. Twice, Ethan had to detour onto side roads, relying on his knowledge of the area to anticipate Bennett's path and pick up the trail again. The cat-and-mouse game stretched for 20 minutes, Bennett's cruiser stirring up dust clouds that forced Ethan to drop back even farther. The sheriff was heading toward the Canadian border, deep into the same wilderness where Emily and Lauren had disappeared. Towering Douglas firs and hemlocks crowded the road, their shadows casting an early dusk under the dense canopy. Bennett finally turned onto a battered access road, marked only by a freshly cut rusted chain. Ethan couldn't follow without being seen, so he drove past, spotting a hidden pull-off a quarter-mile up. He grabbed his binoculars and phone, then trekked through the woods on foot, using deer trails to loop back toward Bennett's destination. The forest parted to reveal the crumbling remains of the Bracken Ridge lumber mill, left to rot since the spotted owl disputes of the 90s. But signs of recent use stood out. Fresh tire marks scarred the dirt, shiny new padlocks secured the gate, and modern security cameras perched on poles. Someone was using this forgotten place for business that demanded secrecy. Ethan settled behind a massive fallen cedar, its bulk providing a perfect vantage point while keeping him hidden. Through his binoculars, he watched Bennett park near a group of vehicles, 2 pickups and a van with British Columbia plates. The sheriff checked his sidearm before approaching 3 men stepping out of the mill's main structure. Ethan's stomach lurched with recognition. He knew these faces from DEA briefings. Alexei Volkov, suspected of funneling drugs through border forests, Liang Zhou, tied to human trafficking networks, and Nathan "Nate" Brody, a local questioned but never charged in smuggling cases. The trio always seemed to dodge arrests, always knew exactly when to evade patrols. Now Ethan saw how. Bennett greeted the men with easy familiarity, exchanging handshakes and backslaps like old buddies. Volkov handed over a thick envelope, which Bennett took without a second thought. The sheriff's back was to Ethan as he inspected the contents, but his posture radiated approval of the payoff. Ethan snapped several photos with his phone's zoom, the images pixelated but clear enough to ID everyone involved. A breeze carried snippets of their conversation across the clearing. Ethan leaned in, straining to catch the words that sent a chill through him. "Feds are crawling all over since that cave find," Bennett was saying. "They'll widen the search grid any day now." "Then we clear out tonight," Volkov shot back, his accent heavy but clear. "Start with the northern warehouse." Joe gestured sharply. "This is rushed. We've got product on the move, clients waiting for delivery. Would you rather talk to clients or feds?" Bennett cut in. "I'll handle the northern site cleanup like I did 8 years back." The offhand mention of 8 years ago when Emily vanished froze Ethan's blood. He forced himself to stay still, keeping his phone recording despite the fury surging inside. "What about the cave bodies?" Brody asked, his voice tinged with nerves. "If they ID the other two, it won't matter," Bennett said with cold certainty. "Sophia and her kid aren't in any system that counts, just another pair of illegals who vanished at the border." Sophia and her kid. Ethan logged the names, picturing the two unidentified bodies from the cave victims who now had identities, even if justice remained out of reach. Bennett pulled out his phone and made a call. "It's me. We've got trouble. The Carter guy's asking too many questions." Ethan's name in the sheriff's mouth felt like a bullseye on his back. He was digging into the evidence, asking about search expansions. "How much do you think this DEA agent knows about his sister's case?" The reply was too faint to hear, but Bennett's next words rang clear. "He's a loose end we might need to tie up. He's at the Cascade Ridge, room 12. I can you?" Volkov grabbed Bennett's arm. "No more dead feds. You took out two, and look at the mess we're in." "I kept us in the clear for 8 years," Bennett snapped. "If Carter keeps poking, he'll find the northern site. Then we're all done." "Then we empty it tonight," Joe said firmly. "Everything, product, gear, files. Torch what we can't haul." "And the cargo?" Brody asked. Ethan's gut twisted as he realized cargo meant people, trafficking victims. "Funnel them through the usual route," Bennett said. "I'll make sure patrols are clear. We've got maybe 6 hours before Carter can rally a real search." The group began to disperse, heading to their vehicles with the smooth coordination of a seasoned crew. Ethan eased back through the woods, his mind racing. He'd uncovered the conspiracy, a sheriff-turned-traitor enabling drug and human trafficking, killing federal agents to protect his empire. But now they saw him as a threat, and they were speeding up their plans. The northern site Bennett mentioned, could that be where Emily was held? Where she might have died? His talk of cleaning it up like 8 years ago implied he'd erased evidence before, maybe even Emily herself. Back at his car, Ethan checked for trackers or bugs, a precaution that now felt vital. Finding none, he started the engine and took a different route back to town, avoiding his earlier path. His phone showed no bars as expected in these dead zones, blocking any chance to call for help. The dashboard clock read 4:47 p.m. Bennett had set a 5 p.m. meet for the informant, clearly a setup now. The sheriff would be waiting with his crew, ready to silence another fed who'd gotten too close. But Ethan had proof, photos, names, a location. More crucially, he knew about the northern warehouse and their plan to clear it tonight. If trafficking victims were there, if any trace of Emily's fate remained, he had mere hours to act. His service weapon felt solid against his side, but Ethan knew he was outmatched and outgunned. Bennett had the home field advantage, allies, and no regard for the law. Ethan had only his training, his resolve, and a faint hope that the northern warehouse held answers about his sister. Ethan's hands trembled as he grabbed his phone, still reeling from the mill. Agent Michael Tran picked up on the second ring, his tone snapping to attention at Ethan's urgency. "Mike, I need a tactical team at my position, top priority." "Ethan, what's going on?" "Sheriff Lucas Bennett's corrupt. I've got photos of him with known smugglers taking bribes. They mentioned Emily, Mike. They're planning to empty a warehouse tonight, moving trafficking victims." "Damn it. Where are you?" Ethan relayed his GPS coordinates, adding, "I'm about 40 miles northeast of Cascade Ridge, near the old Bracken Ridge Mill." Bennett's still there with 3 players, Alexei Volkov, Liang Zhou, and Nathan Brody. "Those names are on our radar," Trent said, his voice heavy with realization. "I can get a team moving, but Ethan, you're in the sticks. It'll take at least an hour, probably more." "An hour?" Ethan's chest tightened. In an hour, evidence could be gone, victims relocated, and any link to Emily erased. "That's the fastest we can do. I'll pull every string I've got. But Ethan, do not go in solo. You're facing multiple armed suspects." Through his binoculars, Ethan tracked Bennett as he hurried toward his cruiser with a tense, urgent gait. The sheriff's earlier composure had vanished, replaced by a frantic edge. He popped open a hidden panel behind the back seat, his movements jerky. "Mike, he's on the move," Ethan reported. "Bennett's grabbing stuff from a concealed compartment." Zooming in, Ethan's breath hitched as he saw what Bennett was pulling out. He stuffed stacks of papers into a duffel, followed by plastic-wrapped bundles that looked like cash. Then came the firepower, a tactical shotgun and what seemed to be an AR-15, far beyond standard sheriff gear. "He's got an escape plan ready," Ethan said. "Documents, money, serious weapons. This isn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. He's had a go-bag prepped." "Means he's been waiting for this moment," Tran replied, his tone dark. "Ethan, pull back. Wait for the team." But as Tran spoke, Bennett's phone rang. Ethan watched through the lenses as the sheriff's face twisted with fury. Bennett flailed his arms, yelling something Ethan couldn't hear, then smashed his phone against the cruiser's hood. Whatever he just learned had unraveled him completely. He hurled the duffel into the vehicle and tore off, tires spitting gravel as he sped down a forest road deeper into the wild. "He's bolting," Ethan said, already jogging to his Honda, heading north on a parallel service road. "Mike, he talked about cleaning a northern site like he did 8 years ago. He knows where Emily is. This could be my only shot." "Damn it, Ethan," Tran growled. "Keep your phone on. I'll track your GPS as long as you've got signal. The team's following your trail." Ethan fired up the Honda, tailing Bennett at a distance where the sheriff's dust cloud stayed in sight without giving him away. Bennett drove like a man possessed, taking curves at reckless speeds, his cruiser's heavy frame lurching on the loose gravel. The route sparked recognition in Ethan. These were the old smuggling paths he'd studied in the case files, trails older than the highways, snaking toward hidden border crossings. The same ones Emily and Lauren had been chasing 8 years ago. "He's heading to the zones he labeled impassable during the first search," Ethan told Tran. "The spots he made sure we skipped." "Son of a bitch," Tran muttered. "Keep me posted every few minutes while you've got bars." But as they climbed into the mountains, Ethan watched his phone's signal dwindle bar by bar. The thick forest and rugged peaks blocked modern tech. He squeezed in one last update before the connection died. "Mike, I'm on Forest Road 347, northbound toward grid reference." He recited coordinates burned into his memory from old search maps. "These are the zones Bennett claimed were fully checked. If I drop off, start here." Ethan, Tran's voice fizzled as the signal cut out. Now utterly alone, Ethan kept up the chase as the sun dipped, casting the forest in fiery oranges and long shadows. Bennett's driving grew wilder, his cruiser skidding on gravel, branches clawing at its sides as he barely clung to the narrow path. After 15 more minutes winding through thickening woods, Bennett's brake lights flashed. Ethan killed his headlights, easing to a stop behind a dense cluster of pines. He grabbed his tactical flashlight and spare clips, giving his service weapon a final check before slipping out. The forest buzzed with subtle noises, wind rustling needles, faint bird calls, the tick of Bennett's cooling engine. Ethan moved cautiously through the undergrowth, his DEA training keeping his steps silent. The trees parted to a small clearing, dim in the fading dusk. Bennett's cruiser sat crooked, driver's door ajar, its interior light spilling a faint glow. The sheriff stood 20 feet off at a patch of ground that stood out from the surrounding forest. The soil was sunken, the plants younger and thinner than the older growth nearby. Bennett had grabbed a shovel from his trunk and was digging feverishly, flinging dirt with desperate force. His voice drifted in the quiet air, a frantic mumble, "Should have moved it years ago. Knew this day would come. Can't let them find this spot. Evidence is still here. Dumb to keep it so close." Ethan's chest tightened. Bennett was unearthing Emily's resting place. Drawing his Glock, Ethan stepped into the clearing. "Drop the shovel, Bennett. Hands up where I can see them." Bennett whirled, his hand twitching toward his holster. Ethan had already clocked the move, his gun aimed dead center. "Don't try it," Ethan warned. "It's done, Lucas. Step away from the grave." Bennett's face was smeared with sweat and soil, his eyes wild in the waning light. But instead of obeying, he let out a jagged laugh, empty of any warmth. The grave? You think this is her grave? He shook his head. Christ, Carter, you have no idea what your sister walked into. Then spell it out, Ethan said, keeping his gun steady despite the shake in his voice. Tell me what happened to Emily. Bennett let the shovel drop but kept his hand near his sidearm. She was just supposed to be routine recon, another Fed sniffing around smuggling trails, writing reports no one cared about. But Emily, she was too sharp, too relentless. Keep going. Ethan felt the gravity of the moment, sensing the truth was finally within reach. She stumbled on our transfer hub by chance. We were moving a load, drugs, girls, the standard haul. Lauren Brooks went for her radio to call it in. Bennett's tone turned icy. Volkov dropped her before she could speak. One shot to the head. She was gone instantly. And Emily? Emily was cleverer. She tried to fall back to their truck, but we couldn't let her walk away. Not after what she'd seen. The operation was too big, millions in product, dozens of girls shuffled through our pipeline yearly. Bennett wiped sweat from his brow with a grimy hand. The higher-ups wanted her alive. They needed to know what the DEA had, who else was digging, how much time we had before more feds showed up. Ethan's grip on his gun tightened. You tortured her for 2 months. Bennett's confession was flat, almost clinical. Kept her in a modified shipping container we used for the tougher cargo. The bosses brought in an expert, someone skilled at breaking people without killing them. But your sister? He shook his head, almost impressed. Emily was stronger than anyone expected. Tell me everything, Ethan said, his voice breaking. She deserves to have her story heard. Bennett glanced at the hole he'd been digging, then back at Ethan. She broke out twice. First time, she got nearly a mile into the woods before the dogs ran her down, scratching marks on trees, trying to leave a trail. We had to relocate the whole setup after that, couldn't risk her signs being found. The sheriff's hand edged toward his gun as he spoke. Second time, she hid evidence, photos, papers she'd swiped, a bloody scrap of her shirt with a note. Buried it in a cache she marked. That's what I'm digging up. Not her body, but her last middle finger to us. If the feds expand their grid, they'll find it eventually. Where is she, Bennett? Where's Emily's body? You want the truth about her death? Bennett's panic twisted into malice. When she finally cracked after weeks of questioning, you know what she gave us. Badge numbers from 5 years prior, old radio codes, patrol patterns that had changed 3 times since we grabbed her. She played us, fed us garbage to stall, hoping someone would come for her. Ethan caught the faint hum of engines in the distance, growing louder. Bennett heard it too, his panic flaring. We realized she'd never give us anything real. The specialist wanted to sell her, said a Fed would fetch top dollar in certain circles, a prize catch. But she'd seen too many of us, knew too much. So I took care of it. Bennett's voice lowered. 1 bullet, back of the head. Same as her partner. She went out fearless, if it means anything. Never begged. Never quit fighting. Where's her body? Ethan demanded, his eyes stinging with tears he couldn't let fall. Bennett's smile was cruel. Where do you think? We had a crematorium for problems like her. No body, no evidence, no closure for families who dig too deep. Your sister's been gone 8 years, Carter. Just ashes now. The sound of vehicles grew closer. Bennett's hand darted for his gun, seizing Ethan's moment of grief. But the forest erupted with movement. 2 figures emerged from the trees. Ethan recognized them from the mill, rifles in hand, moving to box him in. Drop it, Fed, one barked. Ethan tried to swing his Glock toward the new threat, but a rifle slammed his temple. Pain exploded, stars flooding his vision as he crumpled to his knees. His gun was kicked away, hands roughly patting him down, stripping his phone, wallet, and spare clip. Through hazy eyes, Ethan saw Bennett looming over him, pistol drawn. You should have let it go, Carter. You could have lived with the unknown. Now you'll die like your sister, fighting for nothing, saving no one. The darkness surging over Ethan felt almost kind compared to the crushing weight of Bennett's words. Emily had endured 2 months of torment, had schemed and fought, had hidden evidence only to die alone, her body burned to ash, erased except in the minds of her killers. As he slipped under, Ethan heard Bennett barking orders, arranging to move him for disposal. But another sound cut through. Engines, louder now, closer than Bennett seemed to realize. Tran's team, following his trail, racing the clock, just as Ethan had. The last thing he caught before blacking out was Bennett's sharp curse, the sheriff finally grasping that Ethan hadn't come alone. Awareness returned in painful pulses, each wave sharpening the ache from the blow to Ethan's temple. The world jolted and swayed, underscored by an engine's rumble and the stench of oil and fear-soaked sweat. He was in a van's cargo hold, hands zip-tied behind him, shoulder grinding against cold metal that shook with every bump. As his vision cleared, Ethan made out two others, the men who'd ambushed him in the clearing. They perched on wheel wells, rifles across their knees, swapping logistics in a mix of English and Russian. Despite the pounding in his head, Ethan forced himself to focus, to catalog details, to stay sharp. His DEA training took over, commit everything to memory. Survive now. Testify later. The van swerved left, and through the windshield, Ethan glimpsed a rusted water tower, its faded letters spelling Cascade Lumber Company. Another turn crossed a creaking wooden bridge over a stream. 20 minutes of careful observation built a mental map, a charred gas station, a jagged rock outcrop, a cell tower on a far ridge, markers that could guide rescuers if he survived to share them. The warehouse compound loomed out of the forest, a sprawl of rusted metal and cracked concrete. Once a bustling lumber plant, it now served a sinister purpose. Fresh tire tracks overlaid older ones in the dirt. New security cameras watched every angle. Blacked-out windows hid the interior. And Ethan noted air conditioners, odd for a derelict site, but vital for storing drugs or keeping trafficking victims alive. They yanked him from the van, his legs wobbly from the head injury. The warehouse door swung open, revealing a scene from Ethan's darkest fears. A sour stench hit first, human filth, unwashed skin, terror, and a chemical tang beneath it. Harsh lights exposed a space carved up by chain-link fences into crude cells. Each held multiple victims, mostly young women and teen girls, some barely more than kids. They clustered on thin mats, many bruised, clothes torn, their eyes hollow from learning that cries only brought pain. Madre de Dios, a girl whispered, pressing against the fence as Ethan was dragged past. Others recoiled, trained to fear any newcomer as a buyer or abuser. Along the far wall, Ethan counted at least 50 kilos of what looked like heroin, sealed tight, plus crates stamped with pharma logos, likely fentanyl. A high-tech drug packing setup filled one corner with presses and scales. This wasn't just trafficking, it was a full-blown criminal hub where people were just another product to trade or toss. Then it was already there, locked in a heated argument with Alexei Volkov. The Russian jabbed a finger at Ethan, his accented voice carrying. "This is madness, Bennett." "A Fed? You bring a Fed here?" "No choice," Bennett snapped. He was at the burial site. He knows about Emily Carter. The whole damn operation. "Then we end him now," Volkov said. "Dump him over the border. Let Canada sort it out." "Hold on," a new voice cut in. Liang Zhou stepped out of an office nook, his eyes calculating. "First, we figure out what he's shared, who he's told. If a DEA team's coming, we need to know how long we've got." Ethan was shoved into a reinforced closet, barely bigger than a stall, with a thick door. His phone, gun, badge, and wallet were ripped away, tossed onto a desk outside. They left his hands bound, confident the door and guard would hold him. Through the door's small window, Ethan watched them bicker. Bennett pushed for a quick kill and escape. Volkov fretted about their cargo moving dozens of victims across the border would take hours. Joe fixated on interrogating Ethan, muttering about advanced techniques that chilled Ethan's blood. The guard outside, a twitchy kid barely 20, gripped a cheap AK-47 knockoff, sweat dripping as he glanced at his phone and the warehouse's bustle where others prepped victims and vehicles for transport. Time was slipping away. Tran's team would reach the burial site, find Bennett's abandoned cruiser and signs of a fight, but without coordinates, they'd be searching blind across countless sites. The guard stepped away, summoned to help load victims into a truck. Ethan seized the moment. The closet had metal shelves and he spotted a chipped bracket with a jagged edge. He worked his zip ties against it, the plastic cutting into his wrists, blood slicking his hands. The pain was brutal but necessary. After 5 grueling minutes, the ties snapped. Ethan scanned the closet for anything he could use as a weapon, finding only cleaning bottles and stacks of dusty paperwork. Through the small window, he spotted the guard's jacket slung over a chair, the phone peeking from its pocket. The main warehouse hummed with chaos as the traffickers scrambled to evacuate, their focus on logistics rather than their captive. Moving like a shadow, Ethan cracked the door open. The jacket was just 3 feet away. He snatched the phone, powered it up, and punched in Tran's number from memory. 1 ring 2. The guard was coming back, chatting with another trafficker. Tran came the familiar voice. Warehouse, trafficking victims. Track this phone's GPS, Ethan hissed, hearing boots closing in. Hostages, heavy firepower. The guard turned the corner, his eyes bulging as he saw Ethan free, phone in hand. Instinct kicked in. Ethan grabbed a metal pipe from the shelves and swung, connecting with the kid's temple. The guard collapsed, his rifle clattering on the concrete. Ethan grabbed the AK-47, checked the mag, full, safety off. Sloppy work. Shouts echoed from the warehouse, someone calling for the guard. Through the doorway, Ethan saw traffickers shoving victims toward trucks, ready to bolt. The odds were grim, 1 agent with a stolen rifle against at least 6 armed criminals with dozens of innocent lives at stake. But then he heard it, faint but growing louder. Engines, multiple vehicles closing in fast, no sirens. Tran's tactical team, moving dark and quiet. A trafficker appeared in the doorway, hand on his pistol. Ethan fired a tight burst, dropping him, then ducked back into cover. The warehouse exploded in yells and motion. Federal agent. Ethan roared. Weapons down. A hail of gunfire answered, tearing into the doorframe above him. But his shout had done its job, chaos erupted. Some traffickers bolted for exits. Others dug in, and critically, they stopped herding victims into vehicles. Ethan crept toward the cages, staying low. A teenage girl, maybe 16, pressed against the chain link, tears streaming. Poor favor, ayudanos, she pleaded. Get down, Ethan ordered in Spanish. Help's here. Everyone, stay low, away from the walls. Bennett's voice thundered across the warehouse. Carter, you just sealed their fates. We'll kill every witness before your team gets here. Ethan spotted Volkov moving toward the cages, rifle raised to slaughter the captives. Without a second thought, Ethan broke cover, firing as he moved. His shots hit Volkov's shoulder, spinning him. Return fire forced Ethan behind a concrete pillar, cement shards cutting his face. The warehouse's main door blasted open. DEA, federal agents. Tran's team stormed in, weapons locked, moving like a well-oiled machine. Caught between Ethan and the feds, the traffickers made split-second calls. Some threw down their guns, hands up. Others fought. The air turned thick with smoke and the roar of gunfire. Ethan stayed low, guarding the victim's area. He saw Joe trying to flank the team and fired, driving him back. Then a searing pain ripped through his left arm, a clean shot through the tricep that knocked him sideways. Through the chaos, he saw a trafficker aiming at the cages, at a girl no older than 14. Ethan lunged, shielding her with his body as the gun fired. The bullet slammed into his vest, bruising his ribs but not breaking through. Clear. Suspect down. Medic. The tactical team's shouts signaled the fight was winding down. Ethan stayed over the girl until Tran's voice cut through above him. Goddamn, Ethan, you're hit. The victims. Ethan gasped, rolling off. Check them first. The girl he'd shielded sobbed. gripping his good hand, whispering, "Gracias," again and again. Around them, agents cut locks, opened cages, and called for medics. The warehouse, a hellhole moments ago, was turning into a rescue hub. Bennett was cuffed, blood oozing from a leg wound. Volkov was out cold, medics working on him. Joe hadn't made it through the firefight. In all, 3 traffickers were dead, 4 in custody. Most crucially, Ethan counted 32 victims being led to safety. 32 lives saved because Emily's work, even after her death, had paid off. As a medic patched his arm, Ethan watched the victims wrapped in blankets, given water, treated with care they'd been denied. Some stared in disbelief, struggling to grasp their freedom. Others cried or sat in stunned silence. "This is just one hub," Bennett spat from the ground, his voice dripping with venom. "You don't know how far this reaches. How many more?" "Then start talking," Tran shot back, looming over him. "Your only shot at dodging a needle is spilling everything." Ethan shut his eyes, letting the medic work. They'd saved these people, shut down the site, but Emily was still gone. Yet he could almost feel her presence in the warehouse, her fierce resolve reflected in the survivor's eyes. She'd have been proud of this, even if she couldn't see it. The warehouse looked like a war zone turned triage center, paramedics weaving through victims with calm efficiency while agents secured the scene. Ethan sat on an ambulance tailgate, wincing as a medic cleaned and bandaged his arm. The bullet had gone straight through, painful but not crippling. Around him, rescued victims were assessed, questioned, comforted. Some would reunite with families who'd lost hope. Others had no one, their lives forever scarred by what they'd endured. "Sir, we need to get you to a hospital," the paramedic urged, prepping in 4. "Blood loss, possible concussion from the head hit." "Not yet," Ethan rasped, his voice rough with pain and grief. Tran approached, his face showing he understood. He'd seen enough ops to know when an agent needed answers more than stitches. "Forensics is heading back to the burial site. Dr. Newman's already on her way with ground-penetrating radar. Bennett said she wasn't there. Said they burned her." The words tasted bitter like ash. "Bennett says a lot," Tran replied softly. "But he was digging for something. Let's see what it is." The paramedic glanced between them, exasperated. Tran brokered a deal. Field medics would ride along, Ethan would get basic treatment on the move, and he'd agree to a full checkup after the site. It wasn't perfect, but it beat Ethan trying to drive himself with one good arm and a possible concussion. The convoy rolled through the night. Tactical SUVs, forensics vans, ambulances carrying the most shaken victims to hospitals. Bennett was in an armored van, his leg patched, rights red, his badge and freedom gone for good. The other surviving traffickers were split into separate vehicles to keep their stories straight. Ethan rode with Tran, a medic monitoring his pulse, staring out at the dark forest. Each mile brought him closer to truths he both needed and feared. The clearing glowed under harsh spotlights. Bennett's cruiser sat where he'd left it, the half-dug hole a raw scar in the dirt. Dr. Newman was directing her team, setting up equipment with meticulous care. "Agent Carter, you need a hospital," she said. "After," Ethan replied, his voice firm. She nodded, sensing the weight of the moment. "We're picking up metal objects about 4 feet down, matching tactical gear. The soil patterns suggest a burial around 8 years ago. Not cremated, not destroyed." Bennett had lied about that final piece, perhaps the only shred of mercy in a night of horrors. Ethan watched, leaning on Tran, as the team dug carefully. Layer by layer, the earth revealed its secrets. First came a tactical vest, DEA markings still legible despite years underground. Then, with delicate precision, the remains of Special Agent Emily Carter were uncovered. Ethan sank to his knees beside the grave, his wounded arm ignored, tears falling freely as he gazed at what was left of his sister. "Emily," he whispered, his good hand hovering but not touching. "I'm sorry it took so long. I'm so sorry." Dr. Newman knelt beside him, her clinical tone softened by empathy. "The bones show extended captivity, healed breaks from torture, defensive marks on the hands. But look here." She pointed to the ribs. One gunshot wound to the back of the head. It was instant, a faint mercy in a sea of brutality. When they'd finally ended her, it had been quick. Tran's phone buzzed. "Bennett's talking. Wants a deal." "No deals," Ethan snapped. "He's offering other burial sites, names of dirty officials, the whole network. The DA decides that, not us." Tran paused. "But he's also detailing what Emily did, what she hid." The dig continued, and beneath Emily's remains, they found what Bennett had feared. A sealed plastic bundle, preserved from the elements. Inside were photos of the trafficking setup, documents lifted from Bennett's office, and a bloodied scrap of fabric with Emily's handwriting. Emily Carter, DEA Special Agent, badge number 3847. Taken alive October 15th. Lauren Brooks killed at scene. Sheriff Lucas Bennett involved. Trafficking hub 3 miles north of Bracken Ridge Mill. They're moving drugs and people. Tell Ethan I fought. Tell him I never gave them anything real. Tell him I'm sorry." Ethan gripped the note, his sister's final words shattering something inside him. She'd apologized. After enduring 2 months of torment, safeguarding her mission, gathering evidence while captive, she'd apologized, as if her incredible bravery wasn't enough. "She saved them," Ethan said, staring at the note, then at the ambulances carrying survivors to safety. 32 people are alive because she never stopped." Bennett's full confession came over the next hours, given from his hospital bed in a frantic bid to avoid execution. The trafficking ring had run for over a decade, funneling drugs south and people north, using law enforcement leaks to stay ahead. Bennett had been bought early, his gambling debts making him an easy mark. Emily Carter wasn't supposed to be there, Bennett admitted to prosecutors. "She went off her patrol route, following a gut instinct. Found our transfer point by chance. Brooks reached for her radio, Volkov shot her dead. But Carter tried to back off to de-escalate. Professional to the last." The interrogation laid bare the operation. 2 corrupt Border Patrol agents, a web of safe houses, routes shifted based on Bennett's intel. The cave's 2 unidentified bodies were confirmed as Sofia Martinez and her 9-year-old daughter, Anna, killed with deliberate overdoses after trying to escape during a transfer. "We moved the truck 6 months ago," Bennett said. "The original spot was getting developed, construction crews too close. Thought the cave would hold it until we could torch it." 5 more burial sites were disclosed, each holding victims who'd fought or become risks. Families waiting years for answers would finally have bodies to mourn, some closure at last. As dawn painted the forest gold, Emily's remains were gently lifted for proper burial. Ethan stood watch, speaking softly to his sister, telling her about their parents, the lives she'd saved, the meaning of her sacrifice. Medics checked his vitals, worried about shock and blood loss, but they knew this vigil was as vital as any treatment. "Ready?" Tren asked gently as the coroner's van prepared to leave. Ethan took one last look at the clearing where his sister had been hidden for 8 years, where she'd used her final strength to bury evidence that would bring down her killers, where Bennett had thought dirt and darkness could bury the truth forever. She fought, Ethan said, Emily's note tucked safely in his pocket. Even at the end, knowing she'd die, she fought to leave something that would save others. He let the medics guide him to an ambulance. As they drove toward the hospital, Ethan watched the sunrise gild the Washington forest. Behind them, crime scene tape marked places of horror. Ahead, 32 survivors were starting their journey back to stolen lives. Emily was gone, had been for 8 years, but her resolve to protect and serve had outlasted her, waiting in the earth until her brother could finish what she'd begun. Bennett would rot in prison. The trafficking network was broken. Lives were saved. It wasn't justice, nothing could be after Emily's suffering. But it was resolution. The truth was finally in the light. It was the best Ethan could do with the time he had, time his sister never got.